Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. And we have some live attendees. So just so you guys know, you're always welcome to come in live. I only have, I think there's 24 seats in here. So, but even if you can't come live, I do record these. If for some reason you have a question and you can't ever attend, please email me so I can give you that information. And I can have something to talk about in the event that no one shows up. I can at least answer some questions. So one of the things I like to do is, I don't know if they've talked to you about your test yet, like what to expect and what you're going to see. So I'll just kind of do a quick run through. Week 7, approximately, so that's February 24th, I think that's a Monday. You guys will have your a dosage calc test, the 25 question test. You have to pass it with a 23 out of 25, so you can only miss 2. If you miss more than 2, they're going to ask you to, or they're not going to ask you, they're going to make you remediate either with me or with another nursing tutor. And then you're going to need to take it again. And if you don't pass it the second time, then they're not going to let you go into 120. So you have to pass the 110 test in order to continue on with nursing, with the nursing program. And then you have to remediate outside, and that's a whole thing too. You do this test every semester. So first, second, third, fourth. With starting second semester, you'll take this test on, you'll take it on, what's it called? You'll take it the beginning. So like week 1, you take it. I do reviews for that, so you kind of get prepared, but just so you know, it works. Yes, so you need, I think that the actual number is a 96% or better, which is 23 out of 25. And my hope is that I can show you how to get 100% and not have to worry about fighting for that 23 out of 25. Correct. Yeah. So the types of questions you'll get asked are listed on the blueprint. This is posted everywhere. I have it posted on my OneDrive folder. Did you guys see that and have access to that or checked it out? Okay. Most everything's also on Blackboard, so just kind of keep it there. But the OneDrive folder, this should also be somewhere in the on your 110 Blackboard. There's some rules here that I'm going to get into, but the first thing is you're going to have to know how to do some conversions. You need to know how to work with milligrams, grams, micrograms, milliliters, liters, things like that, but also pounds, kilograms, ounces. You're going to need to know how to work with those and do conversions with those. And we'll talk about this. Teaspoons, tablespoons. There's a few examples, and I'll pull up an example of that. Then you need to, and we'll practice some of these conversions. You're going to need to know how to do what's called an intake output calculation. What you're going to do is at Boyce campus, they'll take like a bunch of different food that the patient receives in the hospital setting and calculate the liquids that they received. So they'll do like pints, cups, quarts of whatever they had. So let's say the patient had a quart of soup and a pint of, Jello, and then 2 cups of coffee. They're going to calculate that and find the total milliliters. You don't have to worry about that at this campus. You are just going to have to find out what the replacement volume would be for someone who, after they go to the bathroom, after they void, you collect it, and then they want to know the replacement volume. The next type of questions you'll see are called oral-based medications. These are probably the ones that, even if you weren't in nursing, you're probably familiar with. This is the, take 2 tablets every day. It's the administration type things. But The difference is it'll be something like the physician orders 500 milligrams of an antibiotic, and the antibiotic is available in 250 milligram capsules. And so you have to convert that to give 2 capsules per whatever the order is. And we'll go through examples of that. So it could be capsules, it could be tablets, but oral medications are also liquids, right? So like it could be like, drinking, like, I don't know if you guys remember like when you were kids and that pink Augmentin, that pink antibiotic that like they're supposed to, it's like, it tastes good. And you're like, I don't know, it's questionable. But they give it to kids because kids have a hard time swallowing down those big giant antibiotic pills. So they do it as a liquid medication. When you learn the liquid medications and calculating milliliters for that, it's going to be the same thing when you learn parenteral medications. So subcutaneous, intramuscular, intravenous, that is going to be calculated the same way you would calculate a liquid oral medication, because I don't know about you guys, but if something's getting injected into me, it needs to be in a liquid form, not a powder, not a capsule. It needs to be liquid, and liquid's measured in milliliters. Correct. Well, parenteral just means through the skin, basically. So, and then if it's going through the skin, it needs to be in a liquid form. I'll show you an example of a reconstitution, but most of the reconstitution examples that you'll likely see are basically just oral-based meds that are liquid oral-based meds, but I'll show you what they mean by that and what that means. Then we'll talk about insulin, and then usually it's just, can you read a syringe and can you add numbers together? And we'll talk about some examples of that. All right. Part of the blueprint also is just reminding you of some things. Like, first of all, when you write your answers, they want you to be very clear and deliberate about utilizing units. So if it's tablets, how many tablets? If it's milliliters, how many milliliters? If it's units, how many units? Just make sure you express it with the label. Now, your test is going to be on Blackboard, so they may tell you just to enter the numerical information. So just pay attention to what the directions are. And don't freak out if you answer it and then get like a whole bunch wrong, because they're going to go back and double check to see like, oh, did you put the unit in there? Because if you put the unit in there, it'll get marked wrong. Even though you should be doing the units. With zeros, just make sure if you have a number less than 1, you use a leading 0. So like if your answer is 0.5, don't write 0.5, write 0.5. And if your answer is 0.5, you should not write 0.50. Don't use trailing zeros. They don't want to see those. Basically, they don't want to think that you wrote 50 or we're trying to write 50 and then there's some funky 0 point in front of it. So you just want to kind of do that. Now, I find that that's less of an issue in the digital age, right? So like one of the reasons why I do this work is I was a pharmacy technician when I was an undergrad, and we used to get handwritten scripts. Like, and sometimes the pharmacist could not read what the doctor wrote. It wasn't just the signature. A lot of times it was the order as well. And then they have to decipher it or call in and get clarification. So nowadays, everything's like, if you've been to like MedExpress or something like that, they just type it up, send it over. And so if it's wrong, it was typed wrong, but at least it's, legible. And that does happen. So, all right. Some rounding rules. So typically, if you have a number greater than 1, you're going to round that number to the nearest 10th if you are required to do so or need to do so. Usually that's when you're doing medications, like you're calculating like a med, and it gives you like 1.25 milliliters. They want you to round it to 1.3. They want you to kind of condense the number down. A lot of that has to do with what syringe you have available. So if you have a syringe that goes to the tenths, hundredths, or even the thousandths, then technically you don't have to round it. But sometimes they're going to ask you a question and you're going to get an answer of like 1.45 milliliters. but there's nothing to mark. There's no syringe or anything like that. Just round it to 1.5. Round it to the nearest tenth. So as a review, when you're doing rounding, you look at the number in the hundredths place. If it's 5 or greater, round up to 1.3. In this example, if it's 4 or fewer, then you round, or you don't round down. People say that word, you just don't round it. Okay. Yes, yes. So they are very explicit about milliliters, but the same method would apply with pounds and kilograms. So like if you take a number, you divide by 2.2 and then you get like 45.454545. They don't want you to write that indefinitely. They want you to round it to 45.5. And we'll go through examples of that. If you get a number that's, and this is typically milliliters, if not always milliliters, if it's less than 1, then round to the nearest hundredth in that instance. Basically, you want to have 2 significant numbers kind of available to you. So like here, 0.969, you would round that to 0.97. In all reality, this is 1 milliliter, but I always say we're in the CCAC math bubble, and we have to kind of just follow those rules. And hopefully you don't run into a scenario where you're like, should I just write 1? But you don't want to just automatically round to the nearest whole number. They want you to practice some of that rounding. You should be familiar with military time. There's plenty of YouTube videos that you can watch with, just explaining what military time is. And if you're not familiar, military time just means like 1,300 hours. It's the same thing as 1 p.m. And like they're going to ask you to like kind of utilize some of that data. I think I see like 1 question of all the semesters that sometimes ask about military time. And I don't know that it's ever been on an actual test, but it's good to know. All right, so those are all the things that you can expect on your test. Just kind of like the bird's eye view. We mentioned the 25 question test. You have an hour to complete the test. They are going to provide you with a calculator. So you don't need to worry about doing like math. Most of the math you can do without a calculator, but you're going to have a calculator. Double check your work, triple check your work, quadruple check your work. I hear every semester when I remediate with students that the only reason they missed the thing they missed is because they rushed through it. They were done early and they didn't take the time to kind of double check their answers. You have more than enough time. An hour is going to feel like forever once you do this, because you're going to knock out most of the questions and you're going to have a hard time with like 2 or 3. And then you just want to make sure you practice. Now, are you guys aware, like on Blackboard, that there's a practice test that you can take?
Yes.
So, yeah, so I think it's a sample, but it's like actually so if I go on Blackboard, I'm in the drug calc workshop tablet or a table. And if you go to drug calc practice, and then it says drug calc exam online version, read the answers here. Like it tells you specifically like how to answer these questions. So it tells you type in 2.5, don't include the milligrams, things like that. When you open that up, and this is something like I sometimes go through this, when you open that up, you click on continue, and then you can get feedback and you can try out these questions and then get answers from it. And you can see all the different things, even like, choosing, where to put that. And I'll go through this towards the end of the semester, but it's good to practice. Even when you know the answers, it's just good to practice to make sure you're being consistent with the answers. So these are just some different questions. And this is a little bit more in line with what your exam is going to look like. It's going to be on Blackboard. They're going to ask you to put in the answers. You put in what you think it is, and then go from there. And the specific answers on these questions tell you, well, I didn't say it on here, but in the intro, it tells you don't include your units. Okay, so that's because the units are already indicated here. So they just want the numbers there. Sometimes I can see the responses here. Usually if you got something wrong, it's because your answer wasn't exactly. So like, let's say you forgot the leading 0.5, it'll get marked wrong. Now that is technically wrong. So they will probably mark you wrong for that. So, but the other reason you'll get it wrong is like, let's say this answer, and let's say you write 1.5 grams, it's going to get marked wrong because you included the unit. even though I'm going to condition you to include the unit, but just follow the directions. And then when someone's actually grading it, or sometimes I can see what your responses are, and then I can go through that. So, okay. Oh, someone message here. Yeah, so so on the practice test, it tells you specifically not to use half, but to use it tells you to use 0.5. So you just follow the directions. I always say, like, on a paper test, they do want you to use 1/2, but on on here, just read the directions for whatever they say. In reality, they're both the same number, so I think they used to get more hung up on that than they do now, but okay. So let's go through some practice, and then just kind of see where we end there, and then this is kind of what we'll do. So I'll also be here live on Tuesday, Tuesday at 11. I'll be in here because I reserved this room. So every Tuesday until your test, and every Thursday at 4:30 until your test, I'll be here. And so, yeah, it's just one test. Yeah, one dosage calc test. So, correct. Yeah. Well, when you do 230, you're going to do pediatric dosages, and that's its own like separate test within 230. And I don't know what the criteria are. Like, I don't think it's the same blueprint test that you have to pass. Well, I have that. It's on I've gone through most of them on YouTube. Once you get to that point, if you need help, I have students reach out to me all the time, and I usually like go over that. Once you go through it though, and you kind of get an understanding of how this stuff works, it's like you'll be like, oh, okay, I know how to do this. The nuance with pediatrics is you have to be very, very specific with like rounding, and then also like being in range, and then knowing when not to administer the med. But it makes sense once you see it. So. Yeah, so well, for 110, yes, it's week 7, that Monday, February 24th. Typically, it's going to be week 1, day 1. It's like, hey, how you doing? Here's your test. Yeah, so as soon as you get there, and they're going to start testing you on it. So yeah, and then yes, again, the total questions for your test is 25. You can miss 2. The practice set, I think, has 27 questions, so that's just giving you some examples. So I'm going to switch my camera here. So that way you can see. Oh, you're welcome. Okay, switch this here. And I'm going to go over a couple things paper-wise. And then, so you can see, same thing I'm seeing. All right, so if you type in the chat, I just want you to know, I can't see it anymore. So if you have a question, please feel free to unmute. I should be able to hear you. So on Blackboard, there's a couple things. These are some of the common dosage abbreviations that you want to be familiar with. So this is on that same like dosage calc workshop tab on Blackboard. What's it called? Yeah, dosage calc workshop. So if you go in that, all I did was print those off. You want to be familiar with these because you're going to see them written out, and then you'll hear me talk about them. Sometimes they're important because sometimes it'll say how much medication should you give per day, but usually they're going to ask you how much med to give per dose. So there's a couple different things there. You'll see PRN, which is as needed, which doesn't really mean anything as far as changing what you're doing because you're still calculating for that dose. There's a couple formulas. You may have heard like the desired over have. I call it ordered over available times quantity. This works great for 110 for just about everything, but as soon as you get to 130 and you start doing flow rates, it doesn't work. At least it doesn't work the same way. So I like to show dimensional analysis, but there's not one way. They don't, at least here, they don't care how you do it. If you're at North Campus, you have to do dimensional analysis. So they're very specific about that. I don't have that preference, or it's not up to me, but the Allegheny campus does not have that preference. They just care that you get the answer. So however you do it. So if you do ratio proportion, if you do any other types of things, you can do whatever. All right, so we'll talk about that. We already discussed these. So this is the things that I wrote down, like when I put this together. I know it might be hard to see on the replay. I don't know if you guys can see that sitting here, but you need to know your basic conversions. You have to know these. I would say if this is something you struggle with, like memorizing these types of things, write them out. Every single time you sit down to practice some of this stuff, even if it's just with me, write it out, because they're not going to give it to you. You have to know off the top of your head that, 1 kilogram is 2.2 pounds, a teaspoon's 5 ml, tablespoon's 15 ml, an ounce is 30 ml. You have to know those off the top of your head. It just has to kind of roll off. So the first semester, it's a challenge. And then second, third, fourth, you have it memorized because you're doing it to some extent with ATI and everything like that. Most everything else here is just rehashing some of the things that were discussed in the previous, in the blueprint, like the volumes and rounding rules and things like that. Later on, we'll talk about drops. That's not until next semester, but I just included in all the review tips. So I even rehash some of the helpful equations, the desired over have. Like I said, I call it order over available. Next semester, you'll do this volume over time, because that's how you calculate flow rates. Then drop rates has a calculation. These are just helpful like tools. Like if you ever get stuck, technically, if you're doing dimensional analysis, then you really don't need a formula. You just kind of arrange it and you figure it out. And it's a good tool to have. But not everyone likes to use that. Sometimes they see that word and they get nightmares. They start to have a visceral response. And I always just say, like, I use it mainly as a tool to show you how how to set up the problems if you ever get stuck. If I tell you that I just do it in my head and I write down the answer, that does not help you at all. Or I just plug this into my calculator. Well, how'd you know where to put each number? I use dimensional analysis because that's a good tool. But I'll also usually will show you ordered over available as well, because that works out too. All right. So the first, I think these were the ones that I did. So the first kind of set of questions here, and I'll just kind of go through a couple here just to kind of get started, are just your basic conversions. Okay. And these are really good practice. If you feel really good about these, then you're in a good starting point. And if not, then you're struggling, then that's what we're here to kind of correct. I think there is a key to this particular practice set. This is the one that's on Blackboard. I just downloaded the one that everyone has access to. So the key is there. But if you ever come across like one of my problems or one of my old like practice sets or something like that, and there's not a key, there's something called Google. And if you type the question into Google, it'll give you the answer. I do that all the time when I'm cooking. I'll put in like, okay, I don't have like grams of something. Like I don't have a scale. I don't know what the heck I'm doing. And then I can convert it and figure out what they want me to do in what I consider real terms, teaspoons, tablespoons. Although I tell my wife all the time, if I see something that says measure something in grams, we're not making it. All right. So let's take something like milligrams. First of all, my conversion. I need to know that 1 gram is 1,000 milligrams. Okay. I need to know that 1 milligram is 1,000 micrograms.
Professor.
Those are just things you have to know and you have to practice doing. Now, I imagine most of you know how to just move your decimal over. And you look at this and you say, okay, my answer is 1.5. Or I look at this one and I see my answer is 0.25. And you might feel really strong to say those answers.
Professor.
Right? Yes.
Can we make a full screen?
Yes, you might have to just double click on my image.
Oh, okay. No.
Currently full screen on my end. So I don't know how to do that on your end, but you should be able to select it where you can just look at the speaker's view. But I don't know how to do that. I'm sorry. So all I did here was I just moved my decimal over. So I moved 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. But what happens inevitably, and this happens every semester, so if it happens to you, don't feel bad. But sometimes you just move it the wrong direction or not enough places. Okay, it happens all the time. So as practice, one of the things I recommend is practicing the dimensional analysis.
Yeah.
And then
I know what
taking the dimensional analysis. And what we're going to do is we're just going to convert. What we're trying to do is we're trying to get rid of milligrams and we're trying to convert it to grams. 1 gram is the same thing as 1,000 milligrams. Did you have a question?
No.
Oh, okay. I was doing, I teach A&P 1 and 2, and in my A&P 1 class, somebody was on Zoom and they had the microphone on, and it just was like, and it was going through the speakers in the room, and it was just like a whole bunch of feedback, and I was like, I ended it. I was like, we're not gonna do that anymore. That happens. So far, it's not doing that in here, so that's good. Yeah, it didn't work out. That's okay. Sorry we get to miss you. All right, missed you this time. So the value of doing this and why I'm showing you this, and even if you don't care to do this dimensional analysis, you're going to hear me throughout the years that they employ me and you connect with me. I do this just because it's helpful to see what we're getting rid of and what we're converting to. If we're converting from milligrams to grams, sometimes it's helpful because if I know that I'm dividing by 1,000, okay, then I know like that my number is going to get smaller. And so it's just a strategy. And if you feel solid and you get this right 100% of the time, don't do anything that I'm showing you, okay? But on the occasion you get this wrong 10% of the time, then it's good to have an alternative strategy to practice, okay? We can do the same thing here with micrograms. And I'm converting micrograms to milligrams. I know I right on top of my stuff here. 1,000 micrograms, 1 milligram. Sorry, I'm writing on top of that. And again, I know that I'm dividing by 1,000 versus, let's say I was going from 0.25 grams and I was going to milligrams. Now you can see that we would multiply by 1,000 in that scenario as opposed to dividing by 1,000. So it's kind of like, it's just a separate question just to kind of illustrate that what the difference is and how you would set that up when you're doing it. If you are, you sit there, you look at that and you know to move the decimal 3 to the right, 3 to the left, then you keep doing that. Don't change anything that I'm saying. And that's really all you're going to be doing is 3 to the right, 3 to the left when it comes to these things for dosage calc. Because everything, at least grams, milligrams to micrograms, all that kind of stuff is moving in by 1,000, either making it bigger by 1,000 or smaller by 1,000. All right. And then the answer to that would be 250 milligrams. All right, so what I'm going to do one more example, And then, like I said, I try and keep these as like just 30-minute reviews, because a lot of times people just drift off on here. You guys probably stay here all day, but I don't know. Are you just starting or are you getting ready to get out of here? Like you have class tonight or are you done?
We're done.
Okay.
We're here.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. All right. So I'm just going to take one of these pounds to kilograms just to kind of show you what some of the what the conversion would look like or something like that. So I have 165 pounds and I want to know how many kilograms that is. Before you do anything, you need to know that 1 kilogram is equal to 2.2 pounds. I've seen other conversions. I want to say it was like 1 pound is 0.45 or 0.40 kilograms, but this is the one that we use in nursing. It's a 2.2 pounds, so let's just stick with that and be consistent. Now, typically when I do this, I just break out my calculator, divide by 2.2, and then I get my answer, round it to the nearest tenth, okay? To stay consistent with what I've been trying to show you and how you can kind of do this with dimensional analysis with everything. This time I'll just put it over 1. What I'm trying to do is I want to get rid of pounds and convert it to kilograms, okay? The pounds cancel out, I'm left with kilograms, then I just put 1 kilogram with the 2.2 pounds. In the event you ever accidentally get a big number and then when you double check your work and you're like, oh, you know, how did I get that wrong? A lot of times it's because you divided when you should have multiplied or you multiplied when you should have divided. So if I take the 165 and divide by 2.2, I actually get an even answer of 75 kilograms. I couldn't remember which one of these gave us something. Well, let's say I had as an example, this is just another example. Let's say I got an answer of 45.454545 kilograms. They don't want to see that answer. They want you to round that answer. And you would round it to the nearest tenth, and you have to look at what this shows. So if it's 4.5, then that would be 45.5 kilograms is what you would round it to. They're going to give you a basic 10 key calculator, but yes, you'll be able to use a calculator on the test. I don't think that you'll be able to use like the computer calculator, like when you do the online like version. They're going to have you come in the lab and then you're going to work on the computer, like all of you together. So everyone will take the test at the same time. So that should be how that goes. So, all right. So I'm going to end there. Any last minute questions before as we're wrapping up? And that concludes you guys. But, and then
I have a question.
yes.
You said in the beginning the intake and the output, and
Yeah.
you said for our exam, we're only going to need to know the output.
Correct. Yes. So you're going to calculate a replacement volume based off of the output. So it's technically an intake output.
Okay, so we won't. Okay, so it would just be like measuring urine or some kind of fluid, right?
Yeah. So it looks like. Give me 1 second. Oh wait, it's right here. So these questions here that say for every 125 milliliters of urine output, replace with 40 milliliters of water. And if the actual output was 500 milliliters, that's the intake output question.
Okay. So, okay. Is diarrhea considered output?
You won't, I mean, probably, but you won't have to worry about that for here. So
Okay.
more so The reason you're calculating the urine output is because you're evaluating kidney function and making sure that they're able to get enough blood supply to the vital organs. So the gold standard for vital organ function is that they're able to void regularly. That's one of the reasons why they won't let you leave the hospital after a surgery until you've voided. And in some surgeries, they want you to have a bowel movement. But the gold standard to make sure that you're getting enough blood supply is that the kidneys are able to filter the urine. So it's probably more so the situation versus how much volume was lost in diarrhea.
Okay.
It's more about the urine output.
Good. That makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have
So
I have a
I'm gonna be
question
doing
before
Go
uh,
ahead.
before you exit. I have a question number 18 question. So when the answers come on a fractions, do you to write the half or we're gonna have to write 0.5?
On the paper test, you should write it as half, 1/2. But on the Blackboard version, if they tell you to write it as a decimal, then write it as a decimal.
But they will give the hints on the top, right?
On Blackboard, the Blackboard test is really the only time that seems to apply. Otherwise, you would do half, 1/2.
Because on the question number 18, it comes like 2/2, and the half tablet they write the on a fraction. So I'm just to be make sure if comes on a blackboard, so we have to write 0.5, right?
Yeah, so like on Blackboard, you would write 2.5 as your answer
Okay.
because it tells you not to use fractions. But on paper, you use the fraction.
Okay. Okay.
Good question. All right, so I will be back to do another review on Tuesday and Wednesday next week, and then again on Thursday. So this is actually a pretty good turnout. If you have any questions between now and then, you can email me or just ask when you're at the review. And you do not have to attend all the review sessions, but I am going to progressively go through the practice work just to kind of show you how I would set these up. And then I usually try and interject some other sample questions when we do it as well. So. All right. Thanks for attending.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.